Good afternoon, everybody. I apologize a little bit for my voice. I promise it wasn't the barn yesterday. It's just a little cold. Thank you for the organization for inviting me to speak to everybody today. I think I've actually had quite some approaches already over the last day and a half. Everybody's quite keen to learn a little bit more about capital. Clearly a bottleneck in a lot of operations. So I've been invited to speak about funding and investment opportunities for ISPs in Africa. I'm going to have the same problem as Jacques. There we go. I've listed a couple of questions that I thought was most relevant for the audience today, probably questions that everybody has on their mind. Is this relevant for my size of ISP or only for the big players? How much equity do I actually have to give away? How do I get in front of these investors? I hear multiple ISPs are being acquired. We just heard it being discussed now too. And what does that mean for me? And has this actually worked for somebody like me? Happy to take some other questions, of course, after the presentation too. Ooh. Maybe a little bit more about us as a team. Unicorn Factory Advisory Services, part of Unicorn Factory Group. We have partners in Work Online, Transmission Co, Hardware Co, Fiber. I think some of the names that you guys also know. We sit within the group as the capital advisory team, and we work all over the continent. We support with subsea cable projects, data centers, FNOs, ISPs, towercos. So anything that at the end makes internet work and is digital infrastructure labeled. And then maybe to some content. I think the numbers everybody knows in the audience. But interestingly enough, when I look at these numbers, I see something different. What I see in these numbers is actually a market that actually has quite some good traction already. Investors have made investments, investors have made returns, but we're not there yet. There's actually a lot of upside still to be had. And from an investor point of view, that is an amazing opportunity. That's actually something that you don't find often around the world. And we see that. If we look at this little block, you can follow the news, and every other month you see billions of rents being announced for the market, and investors have the confidence to spend this kind of money to build more infrastructure and connect more people. I think this all works together into a very healthy ecosystem where you can see that this is a market that brings a lot of new opportunities. So the funding is there. I think one of the questions that was also asked, well, but I also see a lot of ISPs being acquired. Well, any emerging market has some sort of consolidation. It's a healthy process. We cannot have thousands and thousands of different companies without scale. So you will see here that I think you will recognize a lot of these names, that in South Africa, the trend is not any different. You see already 6 listed parties, and I think, Jacques, you are here with your crowd. There is a lot of consolidation already happening in South Africa, and we don't have to worry about that. It's actually a very good dynamic. But if you're not interested to join Jacques and his team, of course we need to talk about how do you get yourself funded with more independent parties. And they are here, right? So you don't want to be part of a consolidation. You have to be prepared for it. You need to know how to do that discussion. But let's focus today on how you can raise your own capital. And we can see that there are indeed already investors in the market, they're active, and who are these parties actually? So what we call infrastructure private equity, private investors who circle the market, see opportunities, and deploy their capital. There's developmental finance institutions, which are usually linked to European or to American states. We see here IFC is part of the World Bank, BII is the British organization, the Europeans, Proparco is from France, FinFund from Finland, of course. And South Africa also has its own developmental finance institutions, being the DBSA and IDC. So these are very known, well-regarded parties that will be out there that we can talk to see if we can source funding for projects. And of course, strategic and corporate, which falls more under the consolidation bracket, where also some of these parties are coming from South Africa themselves. That could be an interesting play, but again, if you want to fund yourself and your projects as more of a standalone entity and you want to keep your own independence, then that is less of a route that you probably want to take. And this slide is just to actually tell you everybody around the world is aligned in the same objective. Everybody sees that this needs to happen. Some people do it out of the goodness of their own heart. I think everybody in year 2 and everybody out there in the investor universe sees, well, if we do this, we achieve so many objectives, but it can also have a financial return for everybody. So the alignment is out there. But how do we actually do this? And I think we're now getting to a little bit more of how do we actually approach the funding need that we have in our organization. And interestingly enough, when you're an operator, when you're a company, you speak a completely different language than any financier you will meet in your life will ever speak. You will probably, if you want to speak to me later, will find that I ask very different questions than what you expected me to ask. So when you run a company, you think in projects, you think very differently instead of building platforms. Is my money safe, or will my money generate a return? You think in delivering for clients, right? So when you start speaking to capital, you need to make sure you recalibrate your discussions for that. And capital itself is also a very broad term for very many different types of capital. And when we look at what an operator and a company needs, especially in the ISP space, you will find, and if I make an example, is that at the moment that you are still here and you're a young company, you need to invest. You have a capital outlay that will precede cash inflows. You have low cash inflows at the start, and you build a platform that will at the end be very valuable. So you follow a J-curve. When you go to the bank, and I think everybody here will experience this, when you go to a bank thinks in, what is my security? And on a linear basis, what are you going to pay me every quarter in capital payments and in interest? So a bank thinks like this. So if you have a need that follows a pattern like this, and you go to a capital provider that thinks like this, you can see that you're trying to fit a square into a round hole. And that's just not going to be able to come together. And you speak different languages, and you have different incentives. But we have actual structures, and we have other different kinds of investors that speak that similar kind of language. So this is what I here call infrastructure investors. There's a broad spectrum of them, and we can touch on them now. And these infrastructure investors actually speak that same language, where we're building platforms over a longer term. So you can already see for the first question that will this network still matter in 15 years is not a question you will ever get from the bank, right? The bank asks, can I make a payment? They are not necessarily interested in, are you profitable in 2 years? They're actually interested in where is this curve going to end up, and is that going to be profitable for everybody? And that's a 10-year view. So there's a different set of investors out there that, as part of our normal work of how we actually get a deal funded, should be approached. And within all these investor blocks, every investor also has a different mandate on how to get you funded. We can talk about equity, we can talk about debt. There's nothing wrong with that by itself. And there's a lot of financial instruments that fit in between that frame that is not equity and debt, and it's called in between, and in finance we call that mezzanine. And there's different kind of structures that we can make happen that actually facilitates the need that the business have. So the different parties that we're actually talking about are infrastructures, private equities, impact investors with a bit of a different mandate, of course, so maybe that fits better with what you're trying to build as a project. The developmental finance institutions, which come, of course, with a governmental angle. So if you are actually buying equipment out of Finland, approach the Finnish government also for funding, it makes a lot of sense. And strategic telecoms, which, of course, is a very different game because you're now giving up your independence. We need to overlay that with the stage where you are in your business, because it becomes very difficult to fund yourself as a business. And I think a lot of people in this room have probably experienced that when you're a small business. In Europe, in Asia even, but in the US, when you're a small business, there's a lot of venture capital available for you. Unfortunately, in Africa, there's less of this capital available. And when you have a capex-heavy business at an early stage, it just becomes incredibly difficult to fund. So when you are, and they're giving you some of the directions of what these numbers are. So if you are below a 40 million rand transaction, so you have a smaller project you want to roll out, that is almost an impossible ask to go to an investor universe. And the main problem that you will experience is that the investor will actually have a lot of sunk cost to do a transaction. They need to hire lawyers, they need to do due diligence, and they need to do final paperwork, and they have compliance costs to actually monitor their investments. So for them to do an investment of 40 million rands, they will need to charge you an extraordinary amount of money to actually recuperate those costs. So it is not a territory that they can actually play in, and that's why you see here, well, it's more of the friends and family kind of space where you need to get this funded, and that's unfortunately the reality where we are. The bank might be able to help you a little bit, but those will be for smaller projects and not the bigger projects. So when you really want to do a larger project, and we're talking about $5 million plus or 100 million rents plus, this is where institutional money really starts to get interested. And when you start speaking to investors, you will always hear this threshold, right? The first question that they will ask, how big is the project? They will even not even ask how much profit do we make or what do you try to achieve? It's the first question. Because it's the first gatekeeper question. If a project is too small, it's already a no. So when you try to grow, also just make sure that your ambitions, of course, match the size of your company, but your ambitions need to be big enough for an investor to be able to participate. When we go to our growth stage, you'll see the holy grail. When any investor comes and you say, well, I do about 40 million rents of EBITDA, you will see all the lights light up. Every investor will all of a sudden be very happy to see you. And this is where you get over the hump and life gets very easy for you. So growth stage companies is where a lot of capital is chasing because that's working for them on a size matter. You've already hit $2 million of EBITDA, and now we can start to really scale with putting a lot of extra money behind you. And mature businesses is probably not what we're going to be speaking about today, but their life, of course, is a lot easier. I think we saw a Cassava announcement not too long ago now, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, transactions. They're structured in a mature way where everybody's actually very interested because, yeah, this is a very safe investment. I think I just want to stop with the last bullet, and we'll touch on it on the next slides. You will never get cheaper capital by just fitting in somewhere, having a good storyline. It is actually, and I'll touch on it on the next slides, how you manage the process and the perception of how you're going to be a counterparty for receiving this money. So even if you overlay it with what stage of capital, what stage of growth you are in, how you approach it will still determine the final outcome of this. And just to reiterate, people think differently about the world. Equity investors, infrastructure investors. You say, hey, I have a great project, I'll be profitable in 2 years. The bank doesn't like it because they don't want to wait 2 years. The infrastructure investor also doesn't even like it because they're thinking about 10 years. So we need to learn how to actually see how the investor looks at the world and start to speak the same language. This is, of course, where we also get ourselves involved quite a bit. And this is the scary slide. And a couple of people in this room have gone through capital raises themselves, so they know what is actually the intensity of what comes your way when you go through a capital raise. But every founder, every company in the younger stage in their life always underestimates what it takes to get external money into the company. So what do investors actually want to see? This is a very short list of what investors want to see. It's really not exhaustive, but you can see it already touches on quite a couple of complex matters that need a lot of preparation. And at the end, you will see that what the investor assesses is this team ready to receive external funding and deliver on its promises, which is a very different way to run your business than when you're just the first owner, the first founder of this business. Now, all of a sudden, you need to report to other people, and they're going to impose policies and processes on you. If you don't prepare for that, it becomes very difficult to go through a process and a due diligence, because actually the first approach is already a gatekeeping exercise, because you approach somebody and you don't have this in order, then it's already almost impossible for them to entertain a discussion because they know they're going to get stuck down the line. So we can, of course, also help with this, and this is the deal packaging, and I cannot stress the importance of this, just to make sure that you are perceived by the investor as an investable company or a person. And that's why you will also see that, for example, your competitor goes into the market and you know they're less profitable or they're not doing the right things, but they already went through a process where they had other investors coming on board in an earlier stage. They still get more traction with other investors than you do. And you wonder, why is that? Well, one of the most obvious answers I would have for that is that they have already gone through this process once. So an investor that is coming in sees another investor and they know they've gone through this process, which is a very elaborate process, makes it an easier investable asset than an asset that actually might make more money, but still needs to go through this process. And this is what you need to do to actually make yourself ready for the interaction. What to expect? Anytime I speak to a new client, they always ask, can we get this done in 4 to 6 months? Unlikely, unfortunately. So the packaging itself, preparation, 2 to 3 months. It depends even how ready you are for the market. Some clients have done this before and we are ready in a month. Sometimes we take 3 to 6 months to actually get ready to the market. It's part of our job. We don't necessarily mind it, but we know how important it is to make sure that you don't lose your investor down the line. Because once you have a no, it's very difficult to say, okay, let me come back later, let me get my ducks in a row, and I'll show you the proposition later. They will actually say, there's other people out there because there's a lot of people competing for the same funding. We will look at other people who don't waste our time. So the preparation is very important. You go to market, you actually solicit offers and interest from other investors with the prepackaged deal. It takes about 2 or 3 months. Once you have interest, they will actually give you a term sheet like, we are interested. These would be the terms under which we think we are able to invest, but we need to do due diligence to make it work. If you like it, you accept it, then you go into due diligence together. You can see the cost also ramp up here, so here comes the sunk cost. And you get to a financial close at the end of negotiating your contract. All in all, 7 to 12 months. I'll give you an example now where the timeline was even a little bit longer. This is in South Africa. If you go to Europe, fortunately for Europe, life cycles are a little bit shorter. When you go to Africa, make it 12 to 14 months before you actually get a deal done, because of the complexity where the investor needs to work through. I thought this would be nice to show you guys. We actually have a case study I haven't mentioned by name. I think maybe some of the people in the crowd will pick who it is. If I go with company expectations, because I think that's where we get the most out of, the client came to us. They're a fiber to the township operator in South Africa. They said, we need a quick timeline because, yeah, time is money. We need to roll out. Can you get the money for us? We don't want to dilute a lot. We want this growth capital. And we don't want this investor to be involved in our business. We know how to run our business. Okay, let's try, right? So we go, and what do we find as a difficulty? The small base of homes passed and connected. What is the problem here is that you have very little proof of concept. So an investor needs to bank on what you have done on a very small batch of actual measurable data to extrapolate that into an investment thesis, which by itself can be done, but the risk in that, of course, is quite high. A young company by itself, no processes, nothing that we actually just saw on the last slide, nothing in place to actually take an investor's hand and guide them that this is a good company to put their money in. The balance sheet itself is too small for a large capital raise, and we're talking about hundreds of millions of rands of capital that was required. At the end, hundreds of millions of capital for a very small company doesn't work unless you restructure the opportunity. And I'm not sure how familiar the crowd is with project finance, but there's a couple of ways to structure it. But the project by itself, call it a bridge, call it a power plant, call it digital infrastructure, is a very different way for people to fund things, and they usually start at zero anyway. So the curve to manage the people that you can approach for that is already a lot easier to do. So we actually restructured our offering as a project finance offering, and we approached project finance funders for this opportunity. And here comes then what you get out of that. Early stage proof of concept means that the funder was actually not that interested to move fast, because what do you do when you move fast? You bank on this small data set. Well, if you wait, every month gives you additional data if this proof of concept is actually working. So the investor themselves is very incentivized not to move too fast because it actually de-risks their position. Structuring. While we were structuring, the investor also had additional requirements and how we structured the capital stack, as we call them. So a blend of equity and mezzanine and debt based on new requirements that were found and how we were going to structure the deal. It takes months to actually get that agreed between parties too. And for an early stage business, the leverage that you have to also negotiate that is actually quite limited. The investor just needs this done. Unless you're a Cassava or an MTN or Baobab, you don't determine those rules all that often. So you actually need to restructure your offering as you go. And this is then what ended up happening, right? So it is close to 2 years before we actually got the money in the bank out of this transaction. I think a very good outcome, because it was actually quite a small company that banked hundreds of millions of rands to grow their network into South Africa. But 2 years is a very long time for everybody involved to be working on one particular deal and get to financial close. And this is where you can also see that why it is so difficult to fund a small company unless the investor is really interested and really has a, for example, impact-driven mandate to make this work, because no investor is actually also that interested to sit in a process for 2 years to make an investment. So they really have additional angles, a very good founding team, or just the proposition by themselves with more qualitative angles rather than just the qualitative angles rather than the quantitative, that will make it worth their while. And then what are our lessons? Please expect longer timelines if you ask for 4 to 6 months. It's almost impossible for any process to be done in 4 to 6 months. Work on your proof of concept. Prepare early, very important. A lot of emotions. You can imagine that once people start taking equity into your business and they're going to tell you that your business is not worth what you think it is worth, you take it very personally, so step back and let somebody else manage. And with all these requirements, and this is a little pitch for myself, but I strongly believe in it too, having a neutral person in between that to manage the emotions, to hide behind and give somebody the fault, right? Sometimes something goes wrong too. I say, oh, sorry, my advisor said something, I shouldn't have listened, I should have come to you directly, and you preserve the relationship too, because at the end it's all people talking to each other, and this is very much a people's business. So these are the lessons that you can take out of a process like that. And that takes me to recommendations, right? So what not to do in a fundraising exercise. So do not approach investors before you are ready. You saw all the requirements that will come your way. When you start doing that, once you are talking, you're going to lose the interest from the investor universe. Don't lead with technology. Start with unit economics, start with platforms building. What can this platform achieve over the long term? Is it suitable for that consolidation play, for example? Don't have unrealistic valuation expectations. Be realistic in what this investor can get out of the deal too. Don't send the same deck to everybody else. Some people are more debt people, some people like the mezzanine, some people like the equity, some people are impact investors, some people are infrastructure investors. Just tailor your approach to the party that you're actually approaching. As specifically, and I think number 5 is one of the more important ones, don't refuse governance provisions. These people are there to also make your business work. They win when you win when they win. They want to have a say in how you're going to run the business. If you expect that not to happen, then they're going to take it as you're not being serious and not ready for external capital. That doesn't mean you have to give up a lot of equity, but it does mean that they're going to be actively involved in how the company is going to be governed. A little joke, but I think I want to land that I understand that everybody is in the same situation. It's a chicken and egg. A small business needs capital to grow and to achieve KPIs that the investors want to see. And the investors say, why don't you achieve these KPIs? Well, I don't have the capital to grow. We're all in the same situation. And my answer is, maybe it is good that we're all in the same situation because we can learn from each other, but there are ways to manage it through the ways that I've ended up in the presentation. So when you get stuck in this cycle, step back a bit and think about what I've said today, even come and speak to us, I guess. But there are ways to structure yourself out of this, where investors will come to the party when your KPIs start to work because you structure your business where you can report these KPIs professionally to your investor. And then what should we do? Not what should we not do, but what should we do? Segment your investors, already think about what you want. Sometimes equity is actually a very good instrument to achieve your growth, but you might actually really not be interested in an equity investor into your business. It will become very difficult for anybody to agree to make an equity investment in your business if it's clear that you don't want them, right? So also make sure that you're realistic in what you want. If you don't want the burden of sleeping at night knowing that there's an interest payment waiting, don't go with that, right? So there's a personal preference to this too. But when you actually go through the business model and the project that you're pitching, at the end we will see where your investors will sit. Professionalize your process and reporting early. I can only recommend that the strongest. If you start today to already prepare for that big slide of big information that I presented, actually you can present this without any effort. You just press a button, it comes out of your systems, and you can show the investor what you need. So by the time that you need it, you don't have to start with all those preparations. You can start today. And with that, design for scale and not survival, right? So if you already built your business, especially if you're thinking of raising capital, that capital can come in very smoothly, then for me to make that investment as an investor is so much easier than when we promise, yeah, for now it's going to be very difficult. We don't have the people, the processes, but give me the money and we'll sort it out afterwards. You can already feel that is going to give a lot of tension in the room. So if you want to raise capital and it's going to take you 7 to 12 months, and you still need to do all this as part of the preparation, you are going to be part of the 2-year project timeline. So I can only recommend, if you have the capacity, if you have the capital for it now, already put these 2 points in place. With your selection of your capital, make sure that they act as partner. There's a lot, money is money. There's actually a lot of money out there, and I think hopefully today I've given you a little bit of a route to access it, but money is money. So what is a differentiator is the people that are giving you this money. What can they add? Do they have platforms? Do they have introductions? Do they have technical skills that will actually make you a better business and a better founder over the longer term? So do your own questionnaire and due diligence too on them. And then the last one is speak their language, right? Think in platforms, not in projects. As a company, as a founder, you don't think in platforms. But when you start talking to investors, these are the terminologies that you will be thrown your way. So when you think about it and what can my platform look like, the discussions will become so much easier. There you are. Again, alignment. I think from all this, what you've heard me say, alignment is actually quite key. You want a partner that's aligned with you. You want to offer them alignment with what you can offer for them. And this is what all the investors know. That is why this market is so interesting. That is why you guys see so many billions of rents flowing into the market. Because people out there know they need to speak to the people in this room, because they are not capable to unlock this opportunity. They have the capital. You guys have the expertise. We just need to bring it together. And if you guys wanted to know a little bit more, I'm around. My details, but I'm sure there are some more questions coming out of this.
Questions? I'm actually wondering why you guys are not clapping. He just spoke about a very important topic, funding. Everyone wants to know where should actually one apply for funding. So does anyone have questions before we can let him go? Don't be shy. We all need money. Clearly,
let me then finish with this.
Yeah.
Every project by itself is very specific in nature, right? So everybody has done a project development. Everybody's gone through a life cycle that's very unique of their own, even though the market is the same. So to be able to talk me through that and where you are right now, how I see that going forward, is something that we can do in 5 minutes. So find me, easy to chat about, talk about your requirements. I can give you some guidance where to find it, if it's realistic or not. It's a very easy 5-minute chat. I'm around for the next day and a half. So do that. Thank you.
I have a little gift for you before I let you go.
Yes. Oh, thank
Thank you so much. One more presentation